Okay, welcome in everyone to another new edition of Celtics Beat. This is a very special one for a variety of reasons. Among them, that as producer Evan Valenti and I were joking about just a little while ago off the air, news actually broke before the show, so we could incorporate that into our recording as opposed to about an hour after we post the show. Gordon Hayward's trade or sign and trade with the Charlotte Hornets, that is complete. It is done. All those people that said Danny Ainge got nothing, fire him, crucify the guy. Didn't happen, and we can get into all the specifics of the Indiana situation, obviously, over the course of this show. But the Celtics, in a swap of draft picks, which is really not the important part of the Hornets trade, were able to create a trade exception worth $28.5 million. So this is only one piece of the story. The larger piece is over the course of the next year, while people are still vilifying Danny Ainge. Is he able to use it? Does he choose to use it? And we know a lot of the time these trade exceptions do not get used. Will this one be used? And, can the Celtics bring in either another star or some key rotational players? All of this is to be examined. But first and foremost, we are thrilled to be joined by Bill Doyle, who is just in a matter of days, in the next couple of days, he's already announced it. He is retiring after 40 years at the Worcester Telegram and Gazette, covering the Boston Celtics, among so many other things. Bill, thank you for being with us, and of course, congratulations.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be on your show.
Well, all right, so I have to start with this, I think, and I tweeted out to the people, any questions that you have for Bill and for this show about the Celtics, please fire them over. And so we got a whole bunch, and we will, acknowledge a whole bunch of them later on in the show. But where I want to begin is because you are so well known, renowned for asking the first question, not unlike Johnny Miller, obviously covering the Red Sox. Do you have any questions for us? Anything that you want to ask us? Because we know that you are adept when it comes to asking the first question.
Yeah, my question is, why would you want to interview me?
What are we doing here exactly?
Where do we start? That's the actual question.
Yeah. You are a legend of covering the beat, my friend. I mean, there are a great many reasons to have you on this show. I know, obviously, Danny Ainge tweeted at you. Chris Forsberg, a longtime friend of yours, he was tweeting about how you are his idol when it comes to maybe many facets of life, but certainly as a writer and covering the Celtics. And you were just telling us off air about a tremendous call that you received of congratulations after your announcement.
Yes, this morning, Bob Cousy, Celtics legend, 92 years old. He lived in Worcester. I've written many stories about him. He called to congratulate me on my retirement. And he also called to say, give me an idea. He said, why don't you expand upon your goodbye column, your farewell column, and write a book about all your experiences? And that's not a bad idea if I could remember all my experiences.
Yeah, it's a lot to remember. It's as a lot of the adage is, my favorite one is Bill Belichick has forgotten more football than I'll ever know. I mean, this applies to you, Bill. I mean, you've forgotten more about Celtics history than I'll ever know because of how much of it you experienced yourself in person. So, it would be an excellent book if you were to put it to paper, no question about it.
Well, I don't. In my farewell column, I included two quotes. Mm-hmm. And one of them was from Bob Cousy. My two of my favorite quotes that I've ever received from my interviews. And Bob Cousy once said, "I hate it when people ask me for my autograph. I hate it more when they don't." In other words, don't pester me, but don't forget me.
Yeah.
He wanted to tell me where that came from. And he said that he was watching the Johnny Carson show. Do you guys remember Johnny?
Oh, yeah.
Years ago, and Orson Welles was on it. And Johnny Carson asked Orson Welles, "Do you like being a celebrity?" And he said, "I hate it. I want people to leave me alone. I hate being a celebrity. The only time I like being a celebrity is when I show up to my favorite restaurant and the maitre d' says to me, 'Oh, Mr. Wells, we have your table waiting for you.'"
Yeah.
Takes me to my table at a crowded restaurant. So then it comes in handy. And Bob said, that's kind of the way I look at it. Like, I want to be left alone, but once in a while it pays off to be a celebrity.
Oh, Johnny Carson really followed that to a T, huh? I mean, as soon as he retired, he just disappeared. He was gone out of the media.
Yeah, it's funny. He interviewed people for a living, was on TV 5 nights a week, and he didn't like the spotlight.
So, for you, what to the, I guess, sort of in the same vein of, hey, your table's ready, and asking us about Johnny Carson. If we're both, I mean, we're not old, we're not young, right? We're kind of middle of the pack in terms of our media careers, I guess. But if you were to go to a younger Celtics, say one of the recent draft picks, Neesmith, Pritchard, or a guy who's only been around a little while, the Williamses, or Langford, someone like that, if you said, hey, you remember Johnny Carson, they'd probably look at you cross-eyed. So
Yeah.
you have seen in your
They don't remember Jay Leno.
Yeah, well, right. Yeah, seriously. Remember when Conan wasn't on TBS?
Right, yeah.
In your 4 decades covering this team, you have seen a lot. I mean, you have seen a lot, obviously. I mean, you've been covering this team longer than I have been alive, but by a very small margin, but a long time. What are some of the great memories, the great thrills? Before we get, I know people want to talk about Hayward and the trade exception and all that stuff. We'll get there. This man is retiring. What is the stuff, some of the great memories outside of the championships, that goes without saying, that you've seen over the years? What's really stuck with you?
Well, let me just point out, I covered the Celtics for about 27 years.
Okay.
I've been a sports writer for the Worcester Telegram for 40 years. I actually covered the Bruins before the Celtics for a little while, and I covered colleges and high schools. And but I started covering the Celtics. This is a memory. The year after Larry Bird retired. It was Kevin McHale's last year. And what I remember was going to the playoffs in Charlotte, and the Celtics were down by 1 point in the closing seconds. And if they lost, they were going to be eliminated. Kevin McHale, from half court, lobbed a perfect alley-oop pass right over the basket, and D. Brown, who had won the slam dunk contest, jumped up, grabbed the ball, was about to dunk it when Kendall Gill from Charlotte blocked the shot. The game ended. The Celtics lost by a point. D. Brown insisted he was fouled. They didn't make any call. The Celtics lost. And right on at courtside, Kevin McHale retired. Right on the court.
Wow.
Boy, if ever there was a kind of a link, right, between eras of Celtics basketball, because Kevin McHale, you think of him, he's known for winning. Or at least remembered for winning in a Celtics uniform in his NBA career, and an all-time great. D. Brown, no disrespect to him, I love the guy, he couldn't be a nicer person, but is not, remembered for his time with the Celtics as being a winner, a champion, in the way that so many of those other guys are. For those two guys to play together on the same team, I mean, what a great link of just, what once was to what it became for a little while.
For sure. D was not on some good teams, unfortunately. And I remember when Rick Pitino came on board as coach, one of the first things he did was get rid of D. But I liked D. He was a great interview. And he was from Florida, and he went to college in Florida. And I remember asking him the first winter when it snowed, I asked him if he had ever seen snow before. And he said that he came outside, tried to scrape his windshield with a spatula. Because it's all he had. Yeah, and it didn't work out too well.
No way. It's funny though. You mentioned that play and how that's like one of your first seasons, how it ended, and then you have the flip side. I know it wasn't exactly the ending of it, but it was the start of the end of this season. Is Jayson Tatum getting blocked by Bam Adebayo in the playoffs in the Eastern Conference Finals? It's kind of nice symmetry for you there, Bill.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And one other thing is I didn't cover the Celtics a lot this season. Jim Fenton from the Brockton Enterprise covered it for Gatehouse. I moved on to other things, but I think the Celtics this year went about as far as you could have expected them to. Nice if they beat Miami, but they weren't going to beat the Lakers.
No, sad as that is, I agree with it. I mean, I do think it would have been, and this is really no slight on Miami because there were so many significant injuries in that series, but I think it would have been a more competitive series had the Celtics been in the finals. But I don't know, maybe there's some level of bias there for me. I don't think so. But when you think back on the last 40 years, and I know obviously you wrote about it and just, the growth that you experienced as an individual, in your personal life, obviously, in between your wife and kids and grandkids and so on and so forth, not just obviously what you did professionally, but what you did do for work and being a reporter over the last 40 years and how much the medium has changed and how much the media has changed and, the internet and social media and just the way you went about covering your job, access to players, relationships, all of them being able to now express themselves as opposed to through you guys, but directly on social media or whatever their own platforms may be. How has your job, your role really changed over the years to where we are now?
Well, when I first started covering the Celtics and the Bruins, you would write your story on basically a typewriter. And someone who's working at the Garden would fax your story back to the paper. It was called cam fax. You'd hand them a piece of paper, they put it through a fax machine and fax it back there. Your deadlines are much later too. Deadlines are earlier now than they used to be. For the paper, you could take all night to put something online. The job has changed a lot, but it's all about adjusting. I'm sure your jobs have changed over the years.
Sure. I mean, have you viewed them as good adjustments though? Just the advances of technology specific to your profession, specific to reporting, to journalism, to, there was a point in time where, as you acknowledged, like you could have a story, a scoop, and as long as you were comfortable that you were going to beat the TV guys to it, then as long as your story ran that next day and nobody else had it, then you were gold, like all eyes on Bill Doyle. But now obviously it's about having that first tweet. And, a lot of the time, unfortunately, it almost doesn't even matter whether you're right or you're wrong. There's a real lack of accountability out there in the mainstream media. It's just about getting the retweets and the likes and the attention. Whether you were right or wrong, people don't even remember that. Your follower count isn't based on that.
No, you're right. And I'm wondering if people even care as much as they used to about a well-written story. All they really care about are the tweets, the little blips of information that maybe you beat other writers to. But it's different. I don't know if it's better or worse. But again, you just adjust. I've adjusted my whole career. The last couple of years, I've been writing a few more news stories. I've been writing stories about religion. I've been writing stories about people who died in the Worcester area that were well known, in addition to writing sports stories. And it kind of put things in perspective for me. I enjoy sports. They've been my life, but there's things other than sports out there too.
Will you miss it? I'm sure every once in a while you will. There'll be a big game. You'll say, man, that would be fun to write about, or I'd like to talk to so-and-so about whatever it may be. But, the grind of it all, are you happy to be jumping into retirement in the next chapter, or are you going to be, do you see yourself sitting there after a lot of games or even throughout the season, Celtics in particular? And I know you said you didn't do as much of it last year, but just kind of saying, man, I kind of missed the grind of it.
What I'll miss is taking my fingers, putting down on the keyboard, and punching out my thoughts.
Yeah.
That's what I'll miss. And
you'll have Twitter for that, though. You still have Twitter for that.
I still can do that. I can still do that. And one thing that my strength as a reporter was interviewing people, I thought. And I'll miss that. I'll miss interviewing people for sure. I like to put people at ease, maybe even use some humor, become familiar with them. And that's changed too. Years ago, you could get to know the Celtics. You talk to them before games, one-on-one. Then they changed that. They didn't really want you to talk one-on-one with the players before the games. They would put the player up against the blackboard or the whiteboard, and you'd talk to them in a group. So you couldn't get anything different than anyone else. I think that's changed again. Of course, this year, everything was off the table because of the pandemic. There wasn't at the games, but I prided myself on getting to know the players. They got to know me. They would feel comfortable with me, and they might tell me something they might not tell somebody else. One player that I did that with was Tony Allen. Tony Allen said that he appreciated the fact that I would talk to him before and after games, whether he played well or not. And he appreciated that. So when he had a bad game and I went and talked to him, he would talk to me. He might not talk to some other reporters, but he would talk to me. So you would develop a rapport with the player. And that was key to conducting interesting interviews.
Now, you said that your best skill was interviewing players throughout your career. You have a favorite interview? Is any player stick out in your mind that's like, yeah, interviewing him was always a blast because he always had a cool nugget for me, or made me laugh, or always had an interesting perspective on what had happened in the game?
Well, Bob Cousy called him this morning, so
yeah. So that's a good one. Yeah, that'll be a good one.
Bob Cousy is always a great interview. He's a nice guy. He's 92, but he's still sharp. He's still sharp for sure. There are a lot of them, a lot of good players. Paul Pierce and I got along great. I was known for asking Paul Pierce the first questions in an interview. And I remember I did that a couple of times. And then in the 2008 playoffs, I was in Detroit and for I think it was the conference finals. And he was lying on the floor in the locker room. And he looked up at me and says, "You don't get to ask the first question all the time. You shouldn't ask the first question all the time." So, of course, from then on, I made sure I was going to ask the first question. He's kind of joking with me. And he came to Worcester last year to speak at our newspaper's sports banquet, high school sports banquet. And so I got to renew acquaintances with him. And I interviewed him before he handed out the awards. And so I got to ask not only the first questions, but most of them. My editor, Dave Nordman, asked a few too. So Paul was good. And another guy who I'm not surprised has made it big in the media is Kendrick Perkins.
Yeah.
He was really good to talk to, not just to me, but to anyone. He was not the star of those teams, but you could go to him and he would tell you the straight scoop. He would not sugarcoat anything he ever said. And if he thought the team played lousy, he would tell you. He would name names, and he's doing the same thing now on television because he's not afraid what people are going to get upset with what he says. He tells it like it is.
Yeah, being 6'10", it would help that. I wouldn't worry about people like, you know what I mean? Like being 6'10" and kind of a bruiser, I'm just saying. Right. I would throw takes out there like Burke too if I was built like him, no question.
Right. Sorry, but he doesn't even care if Kevin Garnett gets mad at him,
Yeah, no, he doesn't.
What he thinks.
Burke, though, and Evan remembers this. This goes back, couple years, year and a half, something like that. Before Burke was Perk in the media sense. Obviously, he had his NBA career behind him as a player, but before, he was all over ESPN and Fox for a time and doing everything that he's doing. And, obviously such a presence on Twitter. We had him on this show as it was really probably not his first as a, budding media person, but one of his first interviews as he was trying to really make that transition from retired player, what do I do next, into, what is my next career? And I said to him, I was, because, you, as you just acknowledged, you in the locker room as a reporter and so many others, you got to know him in that way. As a fan or just someone that watched him on TV, and even when he was interviewed, he wasn't really vocal, at least maybe in TV interviews or radio interviews. Maybe in the newspaper it was a little bit different, but he wasn't a guy that, like, you thought of maybe Paul Pierce and Garnett and guys like that, like, yeah, they could make it in the media. You never thought of a guy like Perk. He always had the scowl on his face. He never really said much. He was, kind of polite, soft-spoken. Again, this was his media presence at the time as a player. And for him to really become what he has become, it did floor me. It did shock me. And now, the guy's about as loud as anybody you'll find.
But that was the Perk that would talk to maybe just the newspaper people, maybe when the cameras weren't going. But it didn't surprise me. It didn't surprise a lot of the longtime beat writers. He might have a different way of wording things, but he's interesting, and he lets you know what his opinions are, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Was it? Yeah. We've both used the phrase "long time," and whenever I say "long time," when like Sean Grandy comes on the show, he says he hates hearing "long time" because "long time" makes him feel like, like he's old, quite frankly. Like he said, when I hear "long time," I think of Mike Gorman, Tommy Heinsohn, may he rest in peace. Guys like I don't think of me long time, but in reality, he's been doing it for however long it's been, 20 some odd years. And so when you think back on your career, guys that we were just talking about, Paul, Kendrick, obviously KG when he came into the league, and obviously later on as a Celtic and beyond, all these guys that, they entered the league out of high school in Garnett's case, college out of most others' cases, and they play for 10, 15, 20 years, and then they retire, and you're still at it. And you've seen their entire career growth from boys to men, from rookies to Hall of Famers. What's that experience like, just following the journey?
Well, it's fun to get to know the players, the thing about it, when I covered the Celtics, they were bad for a long time. Mm-hmm. They were bad for a long, long time. They went years and years without even making the playoffs. So when they won it in 2008, that was a lot of fun and a breath of fresh air, because they hadn't been good for a while. And so I would say, obviously, that was the highlight of covering the Celtics, when they won the whole thing in 2008 at the Garden, for sure.
So as we're joined here by Bill Doyle, again, days away from his retirement, kind enough, he said earlier, it's the last thing he's doing before retirement is, taking some time with the two of us knuckleheads on the Celtics Beat podcast. He said the thing, Bill, that you're going to miss most is offering people your thoughts. Good news, this is a perfect unscripted avenue to give us your thoughts. Let's get into this current team a little bit, especially with what has gone on of late. How is this team, and we'll get to the nitty-gritty, obviously, of transactions, but just on the surface, this team, what has happened this offseason with players reporting for training camp in just a matter of a couple of days, and then the season beginning in a few weeks, how does this team shape up from where we last saw them in the bubble?
Well, they're smaller. I think they're a good team, and I think they'll probably go as far as they did last year. It's going to hurt losing Gordon Hayward. I don't know if Thompson is going to be much better than Cantor. Maybe. They're different kind of players. It all depends on, is Kemba Walker going to be healthy? And how far is Tatum and Brown going to take them? I mean, they're two great young players, and they have to be great for the Celtics to go to the finals.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it's unfortunate that Boston has had to rely on young talent for so long. It's fortunate for them that those two have responded very well in terms of trying to carry a team to go back to that first run. No Kyrie, no Gordon Hayward, two really green guys trying to put it together, and kind of figure it out on the fly. What about the two guys, Jayson and Jaylen, have impressed you the most? I've talked to a couple people, their maturity for how young they are is really impressive. I mean, both guys, Jayson and Jaylen, both of them super impressive, super mature, have really grown their games over the past couple of years. What's the most impressive thing about them in your opinion there, Bill?
Well, the most impressive thing is they're improving every single year. They're adding something to their game. They're not young players anymore. They're young. But I remember not this year, but last season during the playoffs. So in 2019, I interviewed Brown before a practice. And I said to him, you're not a young player anymore. You're a veteran now. And he kind of smiled and even laughed. But it's true. You're in the league like 2-3 years now. You can't be considered a young player anymore if you're playing a lot. And they are. So they're not the future. They're the present. And what has impressed me most is that they get better every single year. And I remember when Tatum, his rookie year, he started off hitting all kinds of threes, and then he couldn't hit any for like maybe the second half of the season. Well, he's more consistent with his three-point shot now. Brown has become a much better scorer. They're both pretty good defenders. They're getting better rebounding. You know, they're adding to their games, and Brown looks like he's underpaid now. Tatum, $195 million. I mean, if I was making $195 million, I'd still be working.
It's a pretty unbelievable amount of money, but yeah, I love talking to past players about the money that gets thrown around today, obviously, and what that must feel like when you're just looking at these. I mean, a lot of those
how do you
guys
spend it?
However many eras. I mean, guys need to go work after they finish playing.
No, they don't.
No, I mean not now, but back in the day.
Oh,
you know.
All right, I'll put this in perspective. Bob Cousy, last year, 1963. He just won 6 titles with the Celtics. He made $35,000. That was his highest pay. Yeah.
That's like a game check for Jayson Tatum this year. I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Tommy Heinsohn, he retired. He went to go before he was a coach and broadcaster. When he retired to being from being a player, he went and sold insurance
in Worcester.
Yeah.
He went to State Mutual. Bob Cousy and Tommy Heinsohn for a while lived in Worcester. Cousy still does. And they used to commute to the games together from Worcester. And Togo Palazzi, another Holy grad from the 50s, he played for a couple of years for the Celtics. So the three of them would drive in together. And I remember Cousy telling me that he had to drive, though. Cousy had to drive. They wouldn't let Togo drive.
Well, I got to know Togo quite well some years ago. We'd both spent a lot of time on the Cape, close by one another, and he, again, you couldn't meet a nicer guy. Loved to tell stories. Just the worst knees in the world, but some of those 60s tales of the Celtics. He brought me to a season ticket holder event once. This was back when I was in school before I was working in the media. So to give you an idea, it was a long time ago, obviously, but, and met Tommy and Bob Cousy and God, who was there? Gene Conley was there. And,
wow.
It was really an interesting crew of people, but just another, I know like mainstream Celtics fans that don't even remember players from that era, let alone recognize probably some of the names that we're talking about. But I'm in Togo, another hell of a guy for sure.
I got a Togo
story for you. Shut him up about J.P. Ricciardi, another Worcester guy.
Yeah, right. I got a Togo story for you. I got my editor one day a few years ago, and he said, "Oh, Togo Palazzi just died. Call Bob Cousy and get a comment." So I said, all right. I was at home. And then he called while I was on my landline, called my cell phone, and my wife picked up. He said, "Did he call Cousy yet?" She said, "Just about to." He said, "Tell him to hang up, tell him to hang up." So I got on my cell phone. He said, "What happened?" He goes, "It was a different Togo Palazzi who died." How could there be a different Togo Palazzi?
I was certainly not one of those people. I mean, that's interesting. I can't imagine there must be more than two in the whole world.
Right. Togo led Holy Cross to the NIT championship, I think, in '54, and Tommy was a sophomore on that team.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah, no, those guys go way back for sure.
Yeah.
Did obviously, but so back to this current team, and you brought up Gordon Hayward, and I agree. Certainly, the Celtics are going to miss him. They didn't replace him, haven't as of yet anyway. Unless you're just going to get that much more from the younger guys. I don't know how much more a guy like Tatum can give you, or even Brown. Brown has maybe just a little bit, higher level than he's already at to be that perennial all-star. A lot of people think he can be, but Jayson Tatum, there's not too much higher, at least volume-wise, statistically speaking, this guy can climb than what he was last year. But for Hayward, I don't know how much. There have been a lot of reports out there, certainly some from Indiana. Gary Washburn has probably been the guy, at least from a reporting perspective that has been the most tuned into that saga with the Pacers and Hayward's departure on a local level, there really hasn't been a lot nationally from the, Adrian Wojnarowskis and Shams Charanias of the world. But now that this whole thing is done, I don't know what you've heard or encountered over the course of this thing, or if you've been a little disconnected from it, but what's your view of those people that like to look at it and say, one, Danny Ainge blew it, could have had Miles Turner and Doug McDermott, or maybe even a pick, but Ainge's asking price, he wanted too much and he was greedy, and Hayward he was fed up and he left, and blah 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 blah. What's your perspective of this whole thing?
I don't have insight to this. I haven't talked to people about this, but my opinion is it really doesn't matter whether Ainge blew it or not. The way I look at it is, why did Gordon Hayward go to Charlotte?
Mm-hmm.
There to win. He took the money and ran. So
yeah.
I don't know if he wanted to stay in Boston no matter what. The trade with Indiana, if he should have gone there. He would have been, if he wanted to win. So all that matters is he wanted the longer contract. He wanted the more money. He went to Charlotte.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, Washburn had an article in the Globe earlier today, and to sum it up, his reporting, which contradicted some of what was out there in Indiana from, their reporters, and I don't know them on a personal level. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, but we don't know anything really in terms of anything definitive. It's not like Hayward or Ainge have come out and spoken about this, but Gary basically said that Gordon wanted to go to Indiana. He wanted to go home. His wife wanted to go home. And the Celtics and Pacers, they were talking about it, obviously. The Pacers were comfortable giving up Miles Turner, didn't want to, but they were comfortable doing it. Ainge, yes, he did want Miles Turner. A lot of people have said maybe he didn't. He did want Miles Turner, but he also wanted either TJ Warren or Victor Oladipo. The price was too steep for the Pacers. They balked. Then Michael Jordan swoops in, offers the 4 for $120. What we don't know, what really has not clearly been reported here, is if Gordon Hayward would have taken less to go to the Pacers. If it was always about the number, the 4 for $120, then you're right. Doesn't matter. Hayward took the money. Pacers could have offered the moon. Hayward would have had to agree to the deal. And if he wasn't getting the pay, which the Pacers weren't doing at $120, then it's totally irrelevant what the trade package was. He had to agree. The other thing that I wonder, though, is if he would have, let's say hypothetically, he would have taken, say, 110, Ainge could have made the trade. We were still in the moratorium period where Jordan still could have swooped in and offered the 4 for $120, at which point Hayward conceivably could have killed the deal if he wanted to. So I just think there are so many pieces of this thing that we really don't know, that for anyone to have a definitive Pacers blew it, Celtics blew it, Ainge was greedy, Hayward took the money, there are so many vantage points to this that are almost unfair to have without the actual knowledge that I don't think we're ever going to get.
And if he did trade him for Miles Turner, people wouldn't have liked that either. They would have said he didn't get enough. So yeah. I don't blame Danny. It was all about Hayward wanting to move on, and he was over a barrel. He was not operating from a position of strength.
Yeah, it's funny to watch the backlash right now, because you have all these people saying, "Oh, the Celtics have lost three max free agents the past couple of years, being Kyrie leaving to go to Brooklyn. You have Al Horford going to Philadelphia, and now Hayward leaving to go to Charlotte." This has been sort of debated, throughout circles, and Adam has mentioned this on this show for years now, because this has been, I think, Adam, you were on it kind of right after the Horford signing. Do the Celtics have a problem keeping max free agents, keeping free agents in town, or are you with me here when I hear this and saying, look, the Celtics don't have a problem, losing players. The problem is you have other owners and other front offices offering ludicrous contracts to certain guys. I mean, the Kyrie thing notwithstanding, okay, Kyrie leaves, go play with Kevin Durant. Totally understand. Got it. The Al Horford contract was bad, and Philly just traded a first rounder and a second rounder, I believe, to get off that contract so they could ship him over to Oklahoma City. And then everybody after the ink was dry, or when Woj sent the tweet, after they were done burying Danny Ainge, it was, what is Michael Jordan doing? Why are they offering Gordon Hayward, who hasn't had a healthy season in 4 years, hasn't made an all-star team since Utah? Why are they giving him $120 million guaranteed? It doesn't make any sense. Do the Celtics have a problem retaining free agents, or are just other GMs being dumb and other front offices being dumb, costing the Celtics, unfortunately, in these situations?
I think I agree with you. I remember when Al Horford signed with the Celtics, it was like the first big name free agent to sign with the Celtics. They hadn't signed one in a long time. So that was supposed to be the new big thing. But when Kyrie left, it was addition by subtraction. When Horford left, it didn't turn out too well in Philly. So who knows whether he has a lot left. Losing either one of those weren't too bad. Gordon Hayward, you're right. He's injury prone. I wouldn't give him, all that money, but they're still going to miss him next year.
Mm-hmm.
Need somebody to replace him next year. Who's going to replace him? Who on this roster is going to replace him? Are they going to make Jaylen Brown a forward? Are they going to play him? I don't see anybody on this roster who fits that mold right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're banking on either Romeo Langford being healthy and a better player than he was as a rookie, obviously, and certainly playing a lot more and being more involved. You're hoping that, and again, this is not role specific as much as statistically, but you're hoping Jeff Teague is significantly better than Brad Wanamaker was. Like, you're just, it's sort of like the like the Billy Bean Moneyball philosophy of saying, all right, well, it's not that we lost this player that gave us this. It's that we lost, X, and I'll put it in basketball terms now. We lost X number of points and assists and rebounds. And, now we just need to figure out where it's all going to collectively come from. We're not trying to replace one player. We're trying to replace the numbers. But, Hayward, to, sort of contradict my point, gave you so much more than the stat sheet. He was a ball handler. He was a playmaker. He was proficient on both sides. And specifically, that guy, the Celtics don't have that guy walking into the lineup right now. He's, short of one of these younger guys that have come in the last couple of years, turning a significant corner.
The Celtics have a lot of really good guards, but they need some big people. I mean, I know the league has changed. You don't need a superstar 7-footer anymore, but their forwards aren't real tall. They need, and so maybe I guess they're going to rely on their shooters. So maybe this number 1 pick is going to be a great shooter. Who knows? He only played 14 games in college at Vanderbilt, so that remains to be seen.
He's a sniper. Just ask him.
Yeah, I know. He's confident. Confident. And I hope he comes through. I mean, maybe they'll be running up and down the court and shooting threes and, fooling people. I think they're going to be about as good as they were this past season.
In the interest of time, let's get to some of these Twitter questions. There are a lot, so feel free to go as quickly as you want. We'll go semi-rapid fire. But, this comes from just a ton of people, to sum it up. A lot of people want to know about this trade exception that the Celtics acquired, the $28.5 million in the deal from the Hornets, and, trying to replace, obviously, Gordon Hayward. Do you believe Danny Ainge will use it? He's got a year to do so. Could even be next offseason. Doesn't have to be now. Do you believe he will? And any types of guys that come to mind that you think he might be targeting?
I don't think he's going to use it for a while. No. And
I agree with you.
Yeah, I don't think, he's not going to use it just for the sake of using it to make himself look good, because he doesn't care about what people think. He does his job the way he thinks he should do it, and he doesn't feel the pressure from the fans. So I don't think he's going to use it right away. And there's no one really that stands out that I think they should sign.
I just want to point out before we move on here, Adam, that Bobby Marks had it, and I've been kind of regurgitating it a while because I made the point. I didn't have the numbers. 75% of all trade exceptions go unused. Just going to throw it out there. Just for the people. You do with it what you want. I'm just going to say that. I'm not confident in a trade exception. It's a large one. It's the largest in NBA history. But I'm not confident it gets used even at all. And I like what Bill said. I agree with the fact that, Dane doesn't care what you think. He's just going to keep running the team the way he thinks it needs to be run.
So here's I agree with both of those things, but here's my only little caveat to Bobby Marks, stat, which is you can't argue with the stat, right? I could see, remember the Celtics have 3 trade exceptions created by the deals, obviously, in, with Cantor and Poirier being sent out of town as well. I could see a $5 million, 4-point whatever for Cantor expiring. I could see Poirier's $2.5 million expiring. The largest trade exception in NBA history of $28.5 million, which does not need to be used in one fell swoop either. They could use it for multiple players. You can't pay over it. You couldn't, like a lot of people want to say, get Bradley Beal. Well, 1, he makes too much. 2, I don't think Washington's looking to deal him. But you can't, I find it very hard. I totally agree it's not going to happen soon. I think you're talking next offseason, maybe even the trade deadline at the earliest, certainly nothing in the coming days. But to let a $28.5 million trade exception or a large portion of that expire would blow my mind. It really would.
Well, hopefully your mind doesn't get blown. We'll see what happens. But I
that's when you're going to hear from all the fans saying, Ainge blew it.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be crazy. All right, so this will be zeroed right back on you. From Neesmith is legit is the username on Twitter. Was Billy here at the 1986 Dead Show in Worcester with Walton and the Seas? And what's your best 1986 Celtics story?
I didn't cover the Celtics in '86.
I know. Yeah, you said 27 years.
It was I watched them. I watched the Celtics in '86. It was fun, but I don't have any inside scoop from that year.
From Michael here, since the Celtics officially have that trade exception to add to their dwindling, if not already extinguished assets, where do the Celtics rank in the East to start the season, and what moves and or player progressions need to happen for them to have a shot at Banner 18?
Well, I've said this a couple of times. I think they'll probably get to the conference semifinals, maybe the conference finals at the most. Things would have to go right. Maybe add somebody at the trade deadline. This whole season, who knows what's going to happen? They might play a week and have to shut down. We don't know. But if they can go start, the week before Christmas and keep going, Brad Stevens is really good at getting the most out of his team during the regular season. He's a very good coach. And the way he coaches works during the regular season. They need to go further in the playoffs to prove that he has taken the next step as a coach. So,
and we'll get back to the Twitter questions, but I can't help but follow up there. You sound like there are a lot of people, Steven sucks, he has whatever, fire him. Like, that's what people default to. You're not one of those people, obviously. So
no.
You sound like you're somewhat skeptical of Brad, or maybe think that, there's at least in terms of the postseason, he has reached the conference finals a few times. There's an element of him being maybe a little bit overrated to at least how Celtics fans view him.
No, I don't think he's overrated. I think he's done a great job. In Boston with the Celtics, if you don't win the title, you're disappointed. If he were coaching in Indiana, they'd be having parades for him.
Sure.
And I'm a little biased towards Brad because I get along really well with him. And I just got to tell you a little story about Brad. My grandson, when he was 1.5 years old, had a kidney transplanted, Boston Children's Hospital. And my daughter had a GoFundMe page. She set it up to help with the bills.
Mm-hmm.
And Brad, without even telling me, made a sizable donation to my GoFundMe page.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, and so I found out about it through my daughter, because she was the only one that saw the names of the people donating. So I remember going up to him and saying, actually to his wife, I went up to his wife first during a game at halftime. And she said, Brad and I were talking about this. Is this a conflict of interest? Should we be donating to this? And we said, the heck with it. We don't care. We're donating. And then I saw Brad before what was it? It was preseason. It was like the opening day of preseason. It was media day. And I saw him, just me and he were together. And I mentioned it. Oh, thank you very much for donating. He says, oh, don't even mention it. You know, it's the least I could do. Brad Stevens is a nice guy, bottom line. You know? So I'm a little biased, but I think he's the right man for the team to coach. My only point is, in Boston, if you don't win a title, people aren't satisfied, or at least they're not satisfied for long. So he needs to win a title to win over his doubters. And I don't know if this is the team that's going to do it.
So I am, and Evan is right there as well. I mean, we are high up in the Brad Stevens fan club, and I love Brad at Butler. I was so stoked when they hired him, and have all the way through been, a zealot when it comes to all things Brad Stevens. There are plenty of guys that this statement would apply to, but I'm going to zero it in on Brad anyway. It just sort of feels like he has to win at some point, right? And I know they've been winning in the grand scheme of things. It's not like he's a bad head coach. He's got hell, I mean, he could finish, depending on how long he's around. I mean, he's already top 5 in Celtics wins historically. He's
right,
and shooting up the list as well. Doc Rivers, I think, the next one to go by, and Tommy Heinsohn there as well. But it would really surprise me if, when all is said and done, however long it takes, that Brad Stevens didn't win a championship in Boston.
Yeah, I think he can do it. He's the right man for the job. I don't know if he has a team this year that can do it. So maybe maybe make a deal at the trade deadline, use a trade exception. I don't know, but maybe some of these young players who haven't done anything yet blossom. But just on the face of it, entering the season, there are too many other better teams in the league this year.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Brad. When you have to manage expectations, you have to understand, like, this team succeeded a lot earlier on than I think people anticipated. I mean, they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. That first, Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum year. Those two young guys go to the Eastern Conference Finals. It resets your expectations, right? So I think with Brad, and unfortunately, people understand this. Brad and Danny are kind of linked at the hip here. Like, it's Danny's job to give Brad a team that can get him to the finals. And when they fall short, everybody loves to blame Brad. And I'm like, okay, I understand that Brad maybe didn't call a timeout early enough, or he didn't, he played in his canter too much, et cetera, right? But he's also doing what he can with the roster he's given. Like, he's not on the court making shots, and he doesn't. I mean, he has say in what the team looks like, but at the end of the day, it's Danny's job. So Brad can only do so much, and I sort of agree with you here. I'm not quite sure if this is the exact team that wins a championship. I'm not sure. I think there are pieces on it that could, but I'm not quite sure if it's pieced all the way together. But to get back to Brad, like, I think what has happened early on in Brad's career, and we kind of look at Butler. He made 2 championship games at Butler and came up short, and then he's come up short here in the Eastern Conference Finals a couple of times. People, I think, are just a little bit too critical of him. And I know you can be. I understand, and this is like, if you don't win a title, then who cares? But he's also done a pretty remarkable job with some pretty not so great rosters, or pretty young rosters at this point, Bill.
Put it in perspective. The Celtics are the best team in Boston. They're much better.
Not even a hard statement to make at this point.
I know it.
Hey guys,
they're much better.
Revolution just advanced to the conference finals today. Put a little respect on their names.
The Revolution don't play in Boston.
That's fair. And again, neither do the Patriots.
The Patriots don't either, yeah.
Yeah, who are the Patriots?
Yeah, they beat the Cardinals today. Come on.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Great game for Cam.
Yeah. Thanks. I was taping the game. I was going to watch it after this podcast.
Yeah, you're in for a real treat.
Yeah, buckle up, Bill.
Hope you got the fast forward button handy.
I never watch it when the other team has the ball.
You might want to. It's actually might be the highlight.
Yeah, there were some pretty good defensive stands in that one, actually.
All right, okay. No, I did see the end of the first half.
Yeah, there you go. There are a lot more Twitter questions. In the interest of time, we'll get to more obviously next week, and we appreciate everyone's wanting to be part of the show and get your questions answered. And hopefully we hit on a bunch, even though they weren't direct questions. Topics obviously were many. I want to bring this one up though. I think about this a lot. And I think it fits nicely into our Brad Stevens conversation. Danny Ainge, and especially it helps too that you've obviously covered this team through multiple regimes. And I love Danny. This is no attack on Danny as an individual or even as I think he's a very good GM. It's not even an attack on him as a GM. It's the only element of it being an attack is the bottom line of championships. He's been on the job for, what are we at this point? 16, 17, 18 years, something along those lines. He's won one title. He's rebuilt the team multiple times. He's gone to multiple championship rounds. He's won one title. Maybe they're close to another. Sure as hell hope they are. In this city, because you bring up Boston, in this city, is there a Wyc Grousbeck and ownership? They love him. He's not going anywhere, I would think, by Wyc's hand. Like, I think for Danny to leave, it's going to be Danny's choice. But does there come a certain point in time where you look at it and say, you know what, championships are just tough to win, and you got the right guy, and he's going to get you there again? Or do you look at it on the other side and say, you know, one title in almost 20 years, it's Boston, that's not good enough, we need another guy in here?
Yeah, that's a decision that Wyc Grousbeck and Steve Pagliuca have to make. I think they're solidly in Danny's corner and in Brad's. I don't think they're concerned about that yet. You know, there's always a chance they bring somebody else in here and the team starts losing. I mean, they've got a good thing going, but I'm sure they want a great thing going. But the problem is, what are you going to do? Get LeBron to come to Boston?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not sitting here saying I have an answer, or even that I'm
right.
Advocating for Danny Ainge to lose his job. Far from. But I do think about, you know, people's impatience with leadership that is good, very good, great at times, not exceptional, and everyone just demands exceptional. I think being spoiled by what's gone on here across the teams for the last 2 decades. People think that there's a certain generation, multiple generations now of people that believe that's just the way it's supposed to be, when that is not the reality.
Now, you win in the NBA with superstars. The Celtics have, is Tatum a superstar or is he a star?
We're getting there.
I would say he will be a superstar, but right now he's not.
So they don't have a superstar.
Mm-hmm.
You need a superstar to win in the NBA, and the Celtics don't have one, at least not yet. But I think they have a very good coach. They have a good roster. Who knows? Maybe other teams have injuries. The Celtics stay healthy. There's a chance, and maybe that's what you need going into a season. There's at least a chance, and they have one every year since Brad Stevens' second year. They've had a chance.
Interesting time to be a Celtics fan for sure. You know, not wishing time away, but there is definitely an element of wanting to at least fast forward the period of time that just to get an answer on that trade exception, because that, I feel like there's going to be, not even I feel like, I know there is going to be an obsession with that, at least from the Twitter mafia, over the next however long until it's either used or expired. People are going to fixate on that and come up with trade proposals that involve whomever, you know, Buddy Hield. I mean, hell, I got a buddy who comes on the show from time to time. I got a buddy texting me right now. DeMar DeRozan, Nick Vucevic, Rudy Gobert, Buddy Hield, LaMarcus Aldridge, Draymond Green, Harrison Barnes, Aaron Gordon, just racking his brain. You know, like this is what's going to happen for the next however many months until we get an answer to this question one way or the other.
I don't like any of those players you named.
That's tough.
They're good, but are they going to put the Celtics over the top?
Yeah, and then it starts to be which of those guys, or someone else I didn't name, obviously, not only becomes worth acquiring, but worth paying that amount of money and then paying into the tax to keep them, and so on and so forth. Like, these are the things that you need to think about to, you know, examine, because they don't. If there's one thing Danny Ainge, and he's done a lot of things great, but if there's one thing he has done a great job of lately, and I will credit him in this sense for not re-signing Hayward for, if it were a reasonable contract, sure, but 4 for 120 or even, 4 for 110 or whatever, no thanks. He has not sent out bad money. The only bad contract he might have on his hands right now is Kemba Walker if the knee is what a lot of us fear it is. Right. But if the knee is okay, he's got a lot of great contracts on the books and certainly no bad ones.
Yeah, no, Ainge has done, he's made some mistakes, obviously, but he's done a good job overall. I have no complaints with him. They haven't, the couple of times where he's been able to draft really high in the draft, he's got 2 really good players. Mm-hmm. It's just, they're not big men, or they're not LeBron James or something like that. Ainge isn't the problem. It's just they need to get better. I don't know how they're going to do it in the way things are now.
Now you just get to sit back and watch like the rest of us.
Yes, and it'd be nice to go to games again.
Well, that's true. I hope they hook you up
as a fan. It'd be nice for people to get to go to games again.
Yeah, that'll be. I fear that we're a little ways off from that, but it'll be nice. Most important, above all of this, everyone is happy, healthy. I hope.
My family's doing great. Yes,
good,
doing great. And my grandson, I mentioned earlier, he had a kidney transplant. He's 4.5 now. He's doing great.
Terrific. No, that's what we want to hear. Well, thank you so much, Bill. For
hang on. Hang on. Before we go, I got one more, and I don't know if Bill's aware of this. I've been able to do a couple of Celtics games in my life as a reporter. It's been a blessing for sure. I don't know if you know that you're a legend amongst the rest of the reporters there. I'm sure you do know this. But one of the things you are legendary for is your placement at every single either interview with Brad or interview with, you have the pole placement, like the first person right next to him in every single post-game interview or pre-game interview. And before we get out of here, we have to know the secret of how you're able to wind your way through everybody and get to that spot, because that's been you for the past 27, it's just you right there for the past 20 years, right next to everybody. What is the secret? How did you do it?
Well, again, I started just doing, I don't remember why I started doing it, but I started asking the first question, and then it became a tradition. And the other reporters liked it when I asked the first question because they didn't have to. And seriously. And then they could think longer, like, what do I want to ask the coach? Or what do I want to ask Paul Pierce? And maybe I could ask a follow-up, or I could like soften them up with a question first, kind of thing. So they would let me get up in the front. They would like open, it was like Moses, the Red Sea. They would let me get up there. Bill, go ahead, ask. And even the last couple of years when I wasn't around quite as much, they would say, Bill, you're still going to ask the first question. So that was part of it. They helped it happen.
I'll just, every time I've gone, you were the first in line every single, because you get that line outside the locker room as you sit there and wait for them to open the doors and Jeff twist and tell you it's okay. You were always the first guy in line every single time. And I was like, how does this guy do it? How does he do this every single time? This guy is amazing. Unbelievable.
Thank you. That's what I'll be known for, is the first question.
Yeah. Did you feel any pressure every time you had to ask the first question?
I did. Sure you did. I definitely did. Yeah. I thought, what am I going to ask tonight? I got nothing.
Yeah.
Microphone, and I would just think of something in the last second.
Worst things to be known for, and a lot of great things that you were known for, obviously. A Worcester legend, a Celtics beat writing legend, a legend of the industry here locally for sure. Bill Doyle, Worcester Telegram and Gazette, retiring in the coming days after 40 years on the gig and, of course, north of 2 decades covering our beloved Boston Celtics. Thank you so much for being part of this here, Bill, and we hope that even in retirement we have you back again.
Thank you very much for inviting me on your show. I really appreciate it, and I hope I have a great retirement. I hope the Celtics do well and do even better than I think they're going to do.
I think we all share in that. Once again, this show brought to you by betonline.ag. Go to betonline.ag today for your exclusive sign-up bonus. We'll all rally together. We'll have a virtual retirement party for Bill. It'll be a Zoom party. So, unfortunately, we won't be able to clink glasses or anything like that, but we will all, raise a glass to you anyway. Thanks again, Bill, and obviously to Evan. I am Adam. Thanks to everyone for being with us. Your Twitter questions, everything else. We'll be back again for you next week when, at that point in time, Celtics will be getting back to work. Preseason games will be right around the corner. And finally, we don't have to say, boy, this sign and trade going to get done anytime soon? It's done. Gordon Hayward's gone. The trade exception's here. And now we wait to see what Danny Ainge does with it. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again soon.